Okay, I think I got my system working. Does it sound okay now, Josh?
Yeah, you're coming in clear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Josh, this is Deb. Are we waiting on Metro and TriMet?
Yeah, I have not seen either of them.
Okay. What I might do is just give it another minute and then just do my housekeeping logistics, because that always takes me a few minutes anyway.
I think we're also waiting on the other CAG co-chair, Mr.
Yes,
Washington.
we are, Mr. Washington also. Okay. So Greg, all right, if I give it another minute?
Yeah, I think that would be appropriate, Deb.
Okay. I see President Peterson.
Welcome, President Peterson. You wouldn't mind doing a quick sound check?
Okay, test.
Sounding good. Thank you so much.
Anybody want me to sing? No.
I see Ed Washington has joined us. Ed, when you get a minute, if you don't mind giving us a quick sound test.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Sounding good, Ed.
You see me okay? I'm sorry. I'm sort of always looking at the top and my stuff is at the bottom, so I apologize.
No worries. You're looking good. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
We've got you loud and clear. Welcome.
All right. Pleasure being here.
Yes, glad to have you. Greg, I'm thinking I might do my housekeeping, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right. I know, as always, we have a packed agenda, so I feel like I could get through these beginnings. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the IBR Executive Steering Group meeting. We're thrilled to have you with us today. My name is Deb Noodleman, part of the IBR team, and I'm just going to start with some housekeeping, and then I'll hand it back over to Greg to kick off the meeting. So if you go ahead, Josh, next slide. So many of you have already joined us, and we're just thrilled for those of you that were able to make time and space to attend today. We sure hope you're staying safe, healthy, and warm wherever you happen to be. We offer a lot of different ways to attend this meeting. So currently you can either join us with closed caption in English and Spanish directly on the Zoom meeting. You can also join and listen in. And if you are looking for the closed captions, it allows it both English and Spanish in a separate browser. If you go to the next slide, the way you can access closed caption is it should be down in that lower right-hand corner if you're here on the screens, and you can click right on the CC icon and it'll create a separate window for you with your closed captions. We also, I think many of you know this, but we have both this Zoom meeting approach, and you can also join via YouTube live stream. And hopefully either way, you'll find a comfortable way to join us. Okay, so next slide. And then I know most of you have done this, but just a few tips. One is it helps with bandwidth and managing if you can join audio either by phone or computer, not both. And so if you're having a little bit of trouble, sometimes you could just hang up and call back in on your phone, and that will help with some of those challenges. To our executive steering group members, if you're comfortable leaving your video on, we'd be grateful. We want you to be comfortable either way. If you need to stand up and move around a bit, that's fine. whatever that takes, but we're trying to create that feeling of a virtual table and being together as much as possible. So thank you for that. And then please, if you have any kind of technical difficulties, there is a phone number that was sent out directly to the panel members. And then I think, Josh, don't we also have that available for folks on the screen if they have any challenges? I think do we have a number for that this time or not?
We are working on that, but you can send an email to.
Okay, to the email address. Okay, so if we go to the next one more slide here just with the beginnings, is just for the public input. And again, many of you have been joining us at these meetings, and the way we handle public input is that towards the end of the meeting, we allocate 10 minutes for the public to speak on agenda topics that we're covering during the meeting. What I want to first and foremost remind you is there's all kinds of ways to engage here. And Greg will be talking more about that along with a couple other staff as we head through the meeting. But for this piece, people can submit public input to the executive steering group members in advance of the meeting by emailing your comments to info@interstatebridge.org and put ESG public comment in the subject line. You can actually also call a 1-800 number, 888-503-6735. State ESG public comment, and you can leave a voicemail message that will be transcribed and also sent to your ESG members. And in advance of the meeting, they get any comment that's been submitted. There's opportunity at the meeting for some brief public input. And then afterwards, we continue to collect and share, as well as post all of that public input to the website. Okay, so we encourage you to participate. There's lots of ways, all posted on the IBR website, but this is directly to the ESG. Okay, and so from here, Greg, I thought I'd hand it over to you for the welcome and intros, and then I'll take back logistics later. Thanks so much, Greg.
All right, thank you so much, Deb. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our fourth Executive Steering Group meeting regarding the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. First off, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Joanne Hardesty from the City of Portland. She has joined the ESG, and we thank you for moving your schedule to accommodate us. Secondly, I'd also like to recognize General Manager Doug Kelsey from TriMet. As most of you know, Doug Kelsey will be entering the world of retirement here very soon. So we want to recognize his help throughout my time here, and as well as with the program prior to my time here. So just a shout out and thanks to Doug for all his help. So next thing I want to talk about is some of the updates since our January 20th meeting. We have had a full, robust number of sessions with both the Equity Advisory Group as well as the Community Advisory Group. You're going to hear more about those sessions, but we have they are fully engaged in tackling issues and questions. So they are. I think we met with the Equity Advisory Group on Monday, and so their next meeting will be approximately in 2 weeks, and the Community Advisory Group is meeting next Wednesday. So those groups are busily helping shape what this program is going to look like. So we also did a series of presentations to the Oregon congressional offices. So just to inform them of where things are at. We're planning on doing the same things with the Washington congressional group. So just an update on the program and making sure they know what our time frames are. So as they're looking at a federal transportation program, that they are thinking about us and including us in that. So next up, we had a presentation to bring the Washington State Transportation Commission up to speed. This was our first official communication with that group. So it was done in several parts. We had the Office of Urban Mobility provided information regarding some of the issues that they are tackling around tolling and other programs. And we piggybacked and gave an update on where we were at with IBR. So we have been meeting regularly and frequently with staff members, mainly from this group, folks who report up to folks on the ESG. So we've been getting good input on things that they see and needs that they have. So with that, Deb, I'll flip it back over to you.
I think President Peterson, something, yes?
Sorry, trying to eat lunch at the same time.
It happens.
Greg, thanks for the update. Were there any trends or themes in conversations at the Equity Committee that we should know about?
So we're going to have a fuller report out on both the Equity Advisory Group as well as CAG later in today's meeting. But yeah, there's several things on equity that we took some pretty decent deep dives into. So we're going to be engaging them on the definition of equity. And they looked at what each of the partner agencies has for definition of equity. And those were very informative and helpful to their thinking. So they're looking at those to put together what equity looks like for this program. So that was probably one of the key things that came out of it. But once again, more to come in later in the meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking. And thank you, Greg, for the warm welcome and the updates. I'd like to head once around the virtual table if I could and give each of you a chance just to say hello and provide any updates you might have. And if you don't mind, Secretary Millar, I would start with you and then head to Director Strickler.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. As you know, we're addressing existing issues with an aging bridge. It's critical to our long-term needs. After the snow events of the last week, and we've been having a lot of fun with that, and actually a lot of good collaboration in addressing snow management, and the immense amount of work that we've put into keeping the traveling public safe, we've been able to see what it's like to have limited mobility and limited movement of goods and services. We're responsible as transportation professionals for making sure that our assets are resilient for all travelers, people who drive, people who bike, people who walk, roll, commercial vehicles, emergency services. The events of the weekend reinforced that to me. The other thing that I am constantly reminded of is if you don't do stuff with people, they assume you're doing it to them. So I appreciate that we started this partnership by assembling this group. And then one of the first things this group did was put together a citizens advisory group and an equity advisory group. So good to have. I mean, we talked a lot about this at the beginning. We have some difficult conversations and difficult decisions between us and successful completion of whatever it is that we do. And having the right people at the table and some agreement is a great way to get started. So right off the bat, we're getting into purpose and need, vision and values. Looking forward to the conversation. And again, thank you for your participation and your partnership.
Thank you. Director Strickler, then I'll go to the cities.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will echo Secretary Millar's comments. I want to thank everybody for being here. Obviously, this is an important conversation, an important topic, and I will just simply say, for my part, I too am impacted right now, and rather than complain about it, I will just say that I'll be intermittent on my video because I'm working from a cell phone at this point because we have no power at home. I only tell that to say that the resilience of our energy grid, the resilience of our transportation system. I know we had impacts to TriMet system in the Portland area, the significance of the impacts, and then our inability to serve some across the board and across the spectrum has not been lost on me over the last 5 days. So I do want to say thank you to all of you who have made the opportunity to participate today and recognize that we're still responding to Secretary Millar's comments about some of the elements of our system, both transportation and energy, that really aren't quite to the point to where we need them to be to make sure that we can safely address everybody's needs. The other thing that I want to say is I want to personally welcome Commissioner Hardesty. Thank you very much for dedicating the time today. I'm not sure what you had to do to accommodate our schedule for this meeting, but I'm guessing that you have a very busy schedule yourself and probably were double booked. So thank you for your time and energy. It's a pleasure to have you as part of this discussion, and we look forward to the ongoing participation. We really appreciate you being here. And then finally, I'll say this, I'm eager to get into the conversation that we're going to have, recognizing that this is the beginning of ongoing discussion for purpose and need and other elements for this program. But as you all know, this is really important as we go forward, and we need to recognize, and I know from the faces around the table here that we do recognize the importance of folding in what the definition of equity is as we go forward. Mr. Johnson described, I think, a precursor to more conversation to come in the meeting. And I simply say that I know that from the work that we've been doing, we at times in Oregon have historically described equity as a geographic term. And we're trying to make it about people at this point. And so it's an important factor for us as we go forward, and one that I know that this group will prioritize as well. So with that, I'll go off of video so that all the frozen faces will start to move again on my screen. And thank you all for your participation today.
Thank you, Director Strickler. Glad to have you with us. So if I could move on to the cities, and Commissioner Hardesty, if you don't mind, just say hello and any updates you'd like to share.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the warm welcome. And let me just say that I'm here because of my new role as Transportation Commissioner for PBOT for the City of Portland. And I'm here to learn about where we are and hopefully help us move in a direction that will be equitable and fair for a majority of people who need to move throughout our region. So looking forward to learning a lot today and writing down lots of questions to be answered at another time. Thank you.
Thank you so much and welcome. Glad to have you with us. And on, if I could, to Mayor McInerney-Ogle.
Good afternoon, Ann McInerney-Ogle, Mayor for the City of Vancouver. Sorry, we're having some computer problems, but we don't have any updates at this time.
Welcome. Thank you for tolerating. You're all being thick-skinned today is a lot to juggle. Thank you for that. If I could move on, I'd like to go next to RTC and then Metro.
Hello, Scott Hughes with the RTC. And we're just really excited this process is moving forward so well. We love what everyone is doing and how well it's going. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And President Peterson.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to thank everybody as well, but also highlight a conversation that's going on in the legislature that I know the Oregon side of the equation knows about in terms of what folks thought were technical fixes to the tolling program language are now being taken into a committee to further discuss because they are not technical, they are policy decisions in terms of the wording. And so I just want to acknowledge that that work is going on in order to make sure that these projects can proceed forward as envisioned in a transparent way.
Appreciate it. Welcome. Glad to have you with us. And if I could move on next to TriMet and then CTRAN.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Witter from TriMet. I'm the Executive Director of the Engineering, Construction, and Planning Department. And while the general manager seat is being filled, I have been appointed as sort of an interim role. So I will humbly serve this crew and the project team. And if I could take a moment, I'd just like to thank all of our customers who put up and were patient with our service disruptions over the weekend. So for everyone out there, thank you for your patience. We do appreciate you.
Great, thank you and welcome. Next up, CTRAN.
Sean Donaghy, CEO of CTRAN. Really don't have too many updates. Again, just pleased at the expeditious manner that this project is moving forward with. I'm excited to get it moving forward. It's much needed for the region and looking forward to that. And I echo Steve's comments. I'm very thankful to our riders and our customers and all of our employees who came in and really just did an excellent job this weekend through difficult conditions.
Okay, appreciate it, welcome. Next up, Port of Portland and then Port of Vancouver.
Kristen Leonard with the Port of Portland, and I want to just add to the comments Sean made and many others as to a thank you to all of the work that happens between every one of these meetings. You've done an amazing job of keeping us, leaning in on us, if you will, and keeping us moving forward quickly. And also want to just do a add to the welcomes to both Commissioner Hardesty and Steve. Welcome to the team, even if temporarily. We're glad you're here.
Thanks so much and welcome. Port of Vancouver.
Jack Berkman, Commissioner at the Port of Vancouver. Also want to add my welcomes to Commissioner Hardesty and to Steve. This is a very interesting process. I think you're going to find it fascinating, if nothing else, and I'm sure you can make great contributions. I did want to comment and offer my thanks to the staff. There's a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes. It's been mentioned, it's pulling us along. I think that's wonderful. And in particular, I want to give accolades to the project team for the outreach. I'm seeing it in a lot of different ways. I had voiced concern early on about balanced representation between the states of Washington and Oregon, in particular around our advisory groups. I'm seeing that that is what has transpired. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the words and welcome. And if I could then on to our co-chairs and Lynn Valenter. Yes, there you are.
I'm here. I'll echo a warm welcome to our new members and huge shout out of appreciation both to the executives that serve on this group as well as to the staff. It's just an amazingly complex machine with infinite moving parts, and they're just doing a wonderful job of making sure that we're all prepared for everything that we do. I will forego any update at this time as Ed and I both have a lot to share, but we're next on the agenda, so I'll pass for now. Thank you.
All right, and then co-chair Ed Washington.
Yes, I always have to find the microphone down there. I'd like to say welcome to Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, a longtime friend of mine, and Lynn Peterson, a longtime friend from Metro. I would say that through all of this weather, we're surviving, and I will have something else to say a little bit later. But my good companion, Lynn Valenter, I think said what I need to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much and welcome. So glad to have you with us. We're glad to have all of you with us. Thank you for making the time today. And just a couple more minutes, I'll quickly walk us through the agenda. If I could, Josh, a couple bits of logistics and then we'll jump right in. So we always pack your 2 hours. And as soon as I finish these housekeeping items, as Lynn and Ed said, they have updates for you on the community advisory group activities. And then following that, we'll also get updates on the equity advisory group activities. Leave a little bit of time for questions if you have them. After that, we have a longer section on community engagement activities. So really filling in, we hope, what are at least some tidbits that you already know about the wide breadth and depth of outreach and engagement throughout the program. The next topic is some time with you for information and feedback on this substantive topic of updating purpose and need and establishing community vision and values. So it's a little bit of a where we've been and where we're at, and then a piece of work for you together, which leads to the where we go from here. So really excited about all of these major topics today. And after those topics, we will leave 10 minutes for public input. I think I've said this a couple of times, but we share that between the number of people that are interested in providing input. We will ask that when it comes to that time that you raise your hand if you're interested in providing input. I'll repeat that if you happen to be on the YouTube live stream, you need to hop back over to the Zoom link in order to get in the queue and to be able to speak. I'll divide the time. If there's a few speakers, 2 minutes each. If a lot, then we just divide it between folks. And as always, there's opportunity before and after these meetings, as well as in all the other engagement you'll hear about today. We'll do a brief wrap up. I'll confirm upcoming meeting topics, any action items you've developed together. We'll summarize and we'll adjourn no later than 3 o'clock. All right, so plenty to cover and happy to have you with us. Next slide, please. A few just gentle reminders for ground rules to both our executive steering group and our audience is just honoring the agenda that we have today, listening to understand each other and asking questions to clarify. I often call it that focusing on the curiosity and curious to learn and share with each other. Focusing on substance and content, so saying soft on the people. We can be hard on the problem, soft on the people. Seeking common ground wherever possible and helping each other by understanding each other's interests, understanding what you care deeply and value and moving forward together wherever possible. And then just a bit on the balance of speaking time. If you're not talking much, I'd encourage you to lean in. If you find yourself talking a lot, maybe step back and make space for others. So that's about it on the ground rules themselves. And then I think, I don't know if I have any other logistics. I'm gonna do a quick check. Nope, I've covered it all. All right. So we're heading back now to our co-chairs, as they mentioned, and they'll be providing the update first on CAG. Go ahead, Lynn and Ed.
Thank you. I'm queued up first, so I'll go ahead and get started. If I could get the next slide, please. We have had so much going on. We have stood up our community advisory group with all, I think, but one member at this point. We have had our first 2 meetings and a 5-hour orientation that we shared with the equity advisory group. This is only 25 of the members that participated in the 5-hour orientation. We had 19 members from the equity advisory group, 23 from the community advisory group, 11 IBR staff, and 11 of the public who participated in the 5-hour orientation. So thanks to everyone. Next slide, please. These were the outcomes that we stated and delivered on during the 5 hours. We talked about the creation of an inclusive climate and learned a lot about the facts and the history to recognize historic and environmental context of the program. We shared a commitment and discussions on centering equity. We received an overview orientation of the work plan and program activities to include the infamous and all-important purpose and need and community vision and values. And finally, we had the opportunity to provide input on the draft community engagement approach. I would also add that we got a flyover, as it were, of the project area, since we are precluded from doing a face-to-face or in-person field trip. We received a virtual orientation to the site and what could be. And we also discussed the census model. Next slide, please. At our next 2 meetings, you can see here, we addressed some of at the first meeting, it was before the orientation. And so we talked about shared meeting agreements and information, developed an understanding and defined our roles. And then at the meeting that was subsequent to the orientation, we finalized those meeting agreements and shared engagement. Again, we spent a fair amount of time on that consensus model that we've determined for the entire program needs to occur. And people were also very candid in what are they interested in. Many people have a variety of interests, but they all have purpose and passion to joining. And so kind kind of making sure that we were all aware where we were coming from and what we were bringing to the group was an important learning for the group, so that we start to function together collectively and not just as individuals. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll turn it over to my co-chair, the infamous Ed Washington.
Thank you. We have some new members. We have the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. Ryan Webb is a project manager. The Bridgeton Neighborhood Association, Mr. Tom Hickey. Portland Business Alliance, Andrew Hohn, President/CEO. Public Transit Representative, Oregon, Victor Cesar. College Indian Tribes, Bill Ayala, former chairman. And the Public Transit Representative for Washington, Martha Wiley, and the Native American Youth and Family Center is to be determined. Next slide. The next steps for CAG is CAG will convene for the next meeting, which will be Wednesday, February 24th, from 4 to 6. And there we will be working on the purpose and needs, vision and value draft CAG charter. And next meeting after that is Wednesday, March 10th, from 4 to 6 p.m. We'll be reviewing feedback from the community conversation engagement opportunities in February. Members of the public are invited to observe with an opportunity for public comments. Meeting details available at www. So, your next slide.
I think that's it from this section. And we were going to try to get through both updates before we open it to questions. I do want to mention for the community advisory group, the full membership is on the website. And also we were giving updates on the people because all the organizations you all approved at your January meeting. So thank you, team. And if you don't mind, I'll hand it over to Janelle Bell now to do the equity piece, and then we'll come back for questions. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Deb, and good afternoon, committee members, and welcome, Commissioner Hardesty. Great to see you. As a reminder, we stood up an equity advisory group about a month ago in January, and the equity advisory group really has two primary focuses. One is to help the program fulfill our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the second is to really help to monitor and provide guidance on equity considerations throughout the project and all elements. And so this is a very important body to kind of help steer the way in which we conceive and implement equity. Next slide, please. This is just a snapshot of some of the members of the Equity Advisory Group. We meet 5:30 to 7:30 in the evenings, and in addition to living very full lives, our committee is deeply active in their communities, as well as have been providing some great context for us to consider in this project. Next slide here. A little bit more about the members. Currently, we have about 24 EAG members. We still have about 2 members pending. We have 12 from Washington, 12 from Oregon. We have 10 equity experts from program partner agencies. And again, a thank you to all of you. You'll recall that we've asked all of you to appoint within your organizations equity leads for our program to work with. And that's been really a great, I think, best practice, really having equity practitioners in tandem with members of the community helping to shape this work. We have 5 community partners that were selected through our open recruitment process, 9 representatives of community-based organizations who we selected based on sort of their focused area. So Coalition of Communities of Color, Community Foundation of Southwest Washington, Constructing Hope, Disability Rights Oregon, Fourth Plain Forward, Latino Network, NAACP of Portland, Northwest Mountain Minority Supplier Development Council, and Washington State University are those members. Next slide, please. So as I indicated earlier, we had our orientation. This was a joint orientation with the Community Advisory Group. We felt it very important that we identify opportunities for cross-pollination when we could, and that there's so much that both groups can learn from one another as we all center equity. We have an equity advisory group that will be rolling up its sleeves to really focus on equity, but it's all of our role and work as a program to really have a focus on equity. Our January 25th meeting, we had a general program overview and really started to establish our operating norms, kind of how we would work together as a body. And then I really started to begin to define what equity means for the program. And as Administrator Johnson indicated earlier, part of the context for beginning to define equity for the program is really drawing from and learning from all of you, all of the regional partners. And we know that a lot of work has been done just in our region as it relates to equity. And so how do we sort of learn from best practices as well as promising practices as a starting place? And so we did do some work kind of analyzing some of the programs and definitions and strategies that exist in our region. At our February 15th meeting, and that is correct, our committee did meet on President's Day. We had feedback on community engagement approach. Lisa Schauer, who of course is helping to lead community engagement efforts, came and presented, and the committee had some phenomenal recommendations as to how we could improve as well as tweak some of our outreach efforts as well as tactics. And so that was phenomenal to hear kind of some strategies there. We continued to develop the program specific equity definition, and then really started to roll up our sleeves on kind of the big bucket of work as it stands right now: purpose and need, vision and values. And to that last point, we posed 2 questions to our equity advisory group, which I'll just inform you of what we asked them. The first was, what words or concepts do you think are important to include in the IBR program equity definition? And the second was, what should be adapted or added to make it specific to the IBR program? So those were some of the concepts that we started to roll out. Next slide, please. If you could go back just one slide. So next steps for the EAG, the near-term work, we'll be adopting a program-specific definition of equity. And as we get closer, we'd love to bring that before this body to know where we are. We're developing an equity framework that will include our equity definition as a foundation. And this will really help to guide our program decision-making in a way that really centers equity. We'll continue to work to inform purpose and need, as well as community vision and values. And just a reminder, our next meetings, we're meeting about every 2 weeks, is March 8th, 5:30 to 7:30. And then the subsequent meeting will be March 29th, 5:30 to 7:30. All meetings are open to the public. So with that, I think that concludes my slide, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our co-chairs. Thank you to Janelle. We want to open it up if there are any questions, feedback, comments. And it's okay, just raise your hand or I can see it too. And so I think, Lynn, you went up first. Lynn Peterson, go ahead.
Oh, I'll just repeat my question from earlier. I guess I would just ask about trends. Any comments that were made? We've heard a couple of times now that they've provided insight and good input already. And I'm not looking for naming of names. I'm just looking for a spattering of observations that might have come out of that first meeting and people's views of the project and where they said that they wanted to head with it. Thanks.
Sure, President Peterson, that's a great question. Specific to the outreach is we heard a lot of comments really encouraging the program to pay close attention to our houseless community as we created sort of outreach tactics and strategies, really identifying opportunities to outreach to individuals who may not have technology. We know there's a significant digital divide, particularly in communities of color. And a last sort of component was making sure that as we thought about equity and as we sort of developed strategies, is that we were very inclusive of persons with disabilities. And so that we, for example, the Vancouver School for the Blind was indicated as one specific example. So those were some of the very specific things. As it relates to kind of the purpose and need, again, we're just at the very basic beginning of those discussions. But some of the elements that had come up is making sure the project pays close attention to transit. That was listed as an equity factor. And then, of course, components around design, making sure that there are opportunities for all of our communities to have opportunities of weighing in on the program and project's amenities as well as design. And then one of the other elements was really respecting, paying homage, and centering our Indigenous communities. That as we think about the ways in which our program thinks through equity, that needed to be sort of a central point. So those were some elements. Administrator Johnson, I don't know if you want to add some others.
No, you did a great job of covering those comments, and very robust discussion. We had some smaller breakout groups and which I participated by listening and hearing the passion of folks on those issues. So no, I think you did a great job covering it.
Great, thank you, thank you. And Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I'm curious as to how the community advisory groups work and the equity advisory group work intermingle with each other.
So Commissioner, I'll tackle that question. We created the community advisory group to be representative of the various aspects of both communities, to be able to convey concerns from the community aspect to our team. So they are working in a consensus manner. We're going to ask them a lot of different questions, which we want them to think on and provide us feedback. And the equity advisory group is a group that is going to look at our internal processes and basically make sure that we are living up to our promise of being equitable in our processes, that we are reaching out to all of the communities, that we are providing a level playing field for folks to provide input to the program. And then secondly, they will be looking at all of the output, from whether it's from the ESG, whether it's from the CAG. They will be looking at those through an equity lens to inform the IBR administrative team. Are these decisions fair to the community? Have they taken into consideration generally underrepresented populations in each community? So one is a bring full representation of the community. The other is to look at all of the things we do and the outputs through that equity lens.
Thank you. I heard someone refer to it as the Citizen Oversight Advisory Committee. So I hope community is the word that we continue to use, because citizen actually has, unfortunately, some bad connotations today, just how it has been used to divide communities. So I'm a big fan of the word community advisory group as compared to citizen advisory group.
Thank you. We particularly heard that comment and named it Community Advisory Group.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. So if it's okay, as I look around, oh, Lynn, no? Go ahead, President Peterson, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't want to take up much more time, but I think having been in the position of being the advocate in these types of committees, what I would just be asking for is report back, when we report back to us, is if there should be some sort of summary table that shows what we heard and what is being proposed to change. The biggest the biggest part of being on a community advisory committee or on the equity group is knowing that you've been heard and that that information is being shared. And so if there's a way to do that in the documents as well as our slides that summarize things, I would be most appreciative. And I think everybody on the committee would be most appreciative, both of them. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that. You know, we're thinking of a couple tools, and one is, I often think Greg always talks about this as the three-legged stool provides stability in the program. So the equity advisory group, community advisory group, and this executive steering group together. So at a minimum at each of the meetings, the other two do brief report outs. So we always want to have everybody in the know about what's happening in the meetings. And then we are also thinking of like a one-page template that will always let you all know and let the others know too, kind of where recommendations are heading. So when issues come up, when people hit a sweet spot, I call them the gems or the elegant solutions or the ideas that you don't want to have them, you can't all be everywhere. So we're going to work on this way of transmitting it and making the whole really greater than the parts. So thank you. You're all helping us be wiser as we try to move this forward.
If I can clarify just a bit, whether a comment gets forwarded or not, it needs to be documented as why it was not forwarded.
Yeah.
And that is particularly the most useful information. So it's not just the gems of the idea that rise to the top, but it's also the ones that maybe didn't get as much traction, but for whatever reason, you know, are not moving forward. I kind of want to know about the totality of all of that for all three committees. So thank you.
Yep, got it. Thank you, really helpful. Okay, thank you, everyone. Really important and really helpful discussion. So we will keep moving, and we are on to the summary of community engagement activities. And Kimberly, go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Deb. So for those of you who I may not know, my name is Kimberly Pinchetta. I'm the Communications and External Relations Manager for the IBR program. And Josh, if you want to go to the next slide for me, please. So really, we know this is a really important topic. You know, it's already come up a lot, but I know there's a lot of interest in our community engagement efforts. I really just want to make sure everyone here around the table had a good sense of kind of our overall approach and goals for the program, and we're aware of all of our ongoing activities. So next slide, please. And I will note, I know we're running behind time, so I'm going to do my best to go through these slides quickly because we do really want to leave time to hear from you and get your insight and feedback on this as well. But really, this is just recognizing that, you know, we have set these high-level priorities for all of our community engagement work. And you'll see them up here. We've had a lot of discussion about our commitment to equity, but alongside that is also diversity, accessibility, transparency, and inclusion. And we are really trying to make sure that with all of our community engagement efforts, we are using the lens of these values and priorities to approach all of our work, to say, are we actually upholding these values in our outreach efforts? And are there ways we can be doing better? Next slide, please. So alongside the priorities themselves, you know, we came up with these kind of high-arching or high-level overarching goals to really say, what does that mean when we try to implement those priorities and values in our work? So the first, Greg, you know, was discussing this, you know, quite a bit on some of his comments already, you know, really making sure that we're seeking feedback from a diverse range of stakeholders. So we know that there are a lot of different opinions out there in our community when it comes to this program and what their personal experience might be as users of the bridge or just as community members in the overall region. And we really want to make sure we are doing our best effort to hear as many of those voices as possible and really getting as many different perspectives as we can. And so that includes, you know, using different tools and different avenues to reach people, making it easy for people to plug in and engage. And also really making sure that we are looking at broad representation on our advisory groups, on any of our other engagement efforts, that we are really trying to hear from all the different perspectives that may be out there to really help inform our work. So the second goes hand in hand with that, but much more direct, making sure that we are having direct and proactive outreach to include underrepresented and or underserved populations. And this is a conversation that has come up in both the Community Advisory Group and the Equity Advisory Group, is, really recognizing the fact that that does not just mean, race and ethnicity or language. It is also looking at our community members with disabilities, our houseless population, low income, age, basically the whole gamut of people who might not typically have a voice around the table. So it's making sure that, one, we do have good representation on our advisory groups themselves, and also that we are doing that direct proactive outreach for the rest of the community. And Deb, I see we already have a question. You want me to pause for questions as we go?
I was just going to see, in case it's a clarifying question, Commissioner, sure.
Thank you. I'm fine to wait, but it just occurred to me that I didn't see a feedback loop, right? Like if a decision is made that either is supportive or counter to what the community engagement group says, what happens then?
Great, thank you. And actually that is one of the specific goals that we do have outlined here. And so this is in reference to broader community engagement efforts. So I can kind of skip down to that one and then kind of circle back up. But that is certainly one of the things we're trying to be very intentional about, being, one, very open and clear about how and when community input can shape the program. So how are decisions being made? What does that process look like? How can the public give input? And that we are closing that feedback loop. So if we are getting input, but we're not able to incorporate it, why not? Or if it is being incorporated, how is it being incorporated? So that is something we definitely need to put some more work into how we report that out to the public, but that is definitely one of our specific goals that we are working on. So going back up a little bit, so embracing innovation, when we say this is referencing the fact that, say, we want to be very thoughtful about how we provide options to engage. And I'm going to steal Lisa's line to say this is a both and approach. So we are not giving up traditional, avenues for engagement, but we also want to be creative and think through how can we think a little bit outside the box and think of different ways to engage with people and connect with people that, might be a little bit more uncommon. And we also want to take an approach in how we message our work and how we approach our community engagement to really put the emphasis on people. So it's not just about the infrastructure and the concrete and steel. This is really about the people in the community and how this impacts them. And the next goal on here is to minimize barriers to engagement. So this is certainly about accessibility, making sure that our meetings and our materials are as accessible as possible and as inclusive as possible, is also looking at ways to incentivize participation. And I know that this is a conversation that this group, had given us some feedback early on to look at kind of best practices for compensation of volunteers. And so that is something that we have implemented with our advisory group members to offer incentives for participation, recognizing how much of their time and effort they are putting into volunteering on those groups. And this goes hand in hand with what I was just explaining. So the demonstrating accountability through transparency and feedback. So that feedback loop is a big piece of that work, but also just making sure that we are being very transparent in our work, that we are documenting the work that we're doing and the decision-making process, and really providing an avenue for, one, both to hold ourselves accountable as a program and for the community to hold us accountable as well. And that then leads into our next goal, which is establishing credibility and trust with stakeholders in the community. So that, again, very heavily relies on us being accountable and transparent, but this is also being proactive in our communication efforts. So how are we getting information out, making sure that we're doing proactive media outreach and that we are really trying to get the word out as much as possible in terms of program updates, as well as opportunities to engage and inform the program. And that leads into our last, but certainly not least goal, making sure that we're providing opportunities for the public to meaningfully shape program work. So that is, again, being very intentional about our outreach efforts, being very clear about how the community can weigh in and help inform the program. Okay, next slide, please. And one more, please. And so what we've already done just with setting up these priorities and goals, those were really shaped by the feedback we heard both from the partners around the table here, as well as other stakeholders, our bi-state legislative committee members, and just general public input that we had already received. So we really tried to reflect the values and the feedback that we were hearing when we shaped those goals and overall values and priorities. So we are also committed to regularly updating our work. So that is, again, one of the reasons why we really hope to get some insight and feedback from you today. And as has been mentioned, we've already been asking our advisory groups for feedback as well. And we are truly committed to making sure that we are evaluating the effectiveness of the work that we're doing, that we are updating as needed, and that we are really able to be nimble and change and tweak our approach, if you will, to make sure that we're being as effective as possible in our outreach efforts. So part of this spring, we are working on developing an accountability page on our website that will give us a better way to track kind of our overall objectives and goals and support our efforts to be transparent. I'll say right now we're trying to find that right balance between quantitative measures and qualitative measures and how we really reflect the overall effectiveness, because we know it's not just about the numbers. So it's really about the quality of the engagement as well. So that is in development. We hope to be able to bring that back to show this group hopefully later this spring. And, again, we're really focused on how do we incorporate a broad range of tools to ensure that we are really reflecting overall community needs and values and priorities in our work. So next slide, please. So one of the engagement efforts that we have recently completed was a community opinion survey. And so we have just a few kind of high level insights that we'll share that we gained from this survey. So it was really important to us as we started our engagement work that we really had it grounded in some statistically significant research. And this was really intended to be really high level initial kind of opinions and priorities, that the community had related to the program, just to help inform further conversation. So this is just intended to be one piece of our work, but did give us some really great insights as a starting point. So this was an independently conducted survey and included about 900 registered voters in a 4-county area. So that included Clark, Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. And we did oversample for community members of color as well as Clark County community members to make sure that we had statistically significant results from those community members. And we also paired that with a qualitative online discussion board and focus groups to make sure that we were also hearing from real people and had those kind of real voices that help to ground the survey results. So next slide, please. So some of the initial insights. So when asked about overall approach to infrastructure investment, 7 out of 10 people indicated that they thought now was the time to invest in regional infrastructure projects. So that really showed us that people are optimistic about the future, which was really great insight there. When asked specifically about a bridge replacement program, almost 2/3 indicated that they had a favorable view, of the program. There were still about 18% who were opposed, 5% of that strongly. And we noted that those responses were consistent kind of across categories of respondents and participants that were involved. So it really showed us that, the high level takeaway, there is broad support in the public, for the program and for a replacement program, but there's a lot of work that we still need to do to get the word out and have discussions and get more information out there. So next slide, please. And so when asked what their biggest concerns were with a replacement bridge, more than 2/3 said traffic congestion was their top concern. That was followed behind with just over 50% that indicated was the risk of a major earthquake. And when that question was framed as slightly differently to ask what people's priorities were for a replacement, and in addition to those two issues, there were other priorities that came forward, including modernization, safety, job creation, and transit options. And if you dive in a little bit more to that and delve into the details a little bit more for our community members of color who participated, slightly different priorities, including an emphasis on equity, creating jobs and workforce opportunities, climate and transit options. And then the primary reasons for opposition for participants were cost, and then concerns about project delay or mismanagement. So next slide, please. And this is another question. We know that this is going to be a very challenging and difficult conversation when we get to the point where we're diving into funding conversation a little bit more deeply. But we did want to go into this with our eyes wide open and kind of get some initial insights. And so we did ask a question about tolling as an acceptable means of funding for the program. And in general, just over 50% indicated that they believe tolling is an acceptable funding option for the program. Not too surprisingly, 31% indicated they were strongly opposed. So again, digging in a little bit deeper with Clark County respondents, if you look at them specifically, they were more than twice as likely, or excuse me, they indicated they used the bridge at more than twice the frequency of other participants in other counties, but were less supportive of tolling. So again, it's not really a surprise that tolling isn't incredibly popular, since people don't tend to like to pay for something they currently get for free. But it is encouraging that at this early stage in the program that we did see a slight majority of participants indicate that they felt it was an acceptable means of helping to fund the bridge. And this, again, is just really indicating to us that there is certainly a lot more work to do, a lot more conversations that we need to have on this front. And I will just note that we do have the survey results are available on the website. And so that link is there listed at the bottom and is housed in our library section. It looks like we have another question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. This is the only funding question that you asked in this survey?
So it wasn't, so we are really recognizing that this was very preliminary. So this was just trying to get very, very high level initial opinions. So it certainly, again, is not intended to be a comprehensive, suite of questions. And we haven't gotten to the actual alternatives development and really kind of that deeper program development work. So it was just intended as a very preliminary.
I'm very concerned that if you start off with talking about tolling and you don't give people other options, that they think that is the only option that's available. I'm surprised that we didn't actually ask people about alternatives like congestion pricing, which is something that we've been talking about forever in this region. And so if we're just going to ask one question, why not that question, or why not both as far as funding is concerned? It just feels a little slanted when you only give people one option.
Absolutely, very fair point. And I will say, certainly as we're diving into this next round of work, we are certainly asking much more in-depth questions, and that's much more of a conversation, but that is certainly an excellent point, very well taken. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, one more. One more slide, please. Thank you. So, really this next section, so we really wanted to dive into kind of the current efforts and outreach activities, and it looks like one more hand up, so I will pause again.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, President Peterson.
I just wanted to echo on what Commissioner Hardesty was mentioning. And I think the reason in my mind that came forward is, and I know you're saying we're not to that level of engagement yet, but let's just put on the table that there is a cost right now to the level of congestion. And that cost is incredibly high to people in terms of their time, as well as whatever fuel they're burning while they're on that bridge. So in order to have a full conversation about the range of ways to pay for this, we're going to need to get much deeper and do a much more, in-depth conversation with folks to get them in the state of mind that we all are on this committee, which are the costs and the benefits and how we balance those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see another hand. I will continue to pause.
Just very briefly, thank you for this information. While I agree with the comments made about we need to be looking at a suite of options and not just tolling, from the Southwest Washington side, tolling has been such a big controversy. I think this is good information to give us a grounding, a base point to understand where are we relative to where we were when we left CRC. A lot of statements being made, and now this gives me a little bit of start of some numbers as a starting point. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And I will say, and I should have clarified, so these were just a snapshot of some of the results. So we did ask additional questions, or there were other questions that were embedded in some of the fuller survey results. And I just don't have all of those in front of me. So I believe we did actually embed some of those questions about congestion management in some of the questions that were asked. And so I do apologize that I don't have those as snapshots with me, but we do have it as part of the survey results that are available. But to the broader point, we certainly understand there will definitely need to be a broader conversation about the suite of funding options and how we really need to address that. So certainly don't want to imply that there is only one source or one piece of the conversation there. So with this, I know we are running behind now, so I'm going to try to fly through this a little bit more quickly. Really wanted to, again, outline the current engagement efforts that we have underway now and that we have planned throughout the year. So I did mention, we are trying to be very intentional about when we go out to the public, we are clear about what we are asking from them and how their input can help inform the program. So when you look at kind of this really high level timeline, you'll see we are trying to really align some of our large, kind of more comprehensive engagement efforts when we're doing activities such as an online open house or a survey or kind of a suite of events, that's aligning with some of the key milestones for the program to make sure that we are getting community input to inform those decisions as we are at those key milestones in the program work. So you'll see right now we have already highlighted a lot, the fact that we are working on updating our purpose and need and establishing vision and values that we hope to complete this spring. Kind of the next key milestone is going to be establishing the screening criteria and initial range of alternatives this summer and fall, and then moving into narrowing the range of alternatives this fall and winter. And so if you see on the bottom row there, that kind of shows we will have a kind of, again, suite of engagement activities that align with those key milestones and steps. And throughout the entire process, we'll have ongoing community engagement. So next slide, please. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through each item on this list because I will overview each of them in a little bit more detail on following slides, but really just kind of wanted to give an overall sense of, we are really trying to look at a variety of ways to offer people to engage. So we want people to have different opportunities and different avenues to provide input so that they can engage in whatever way they feel the most comfortable. So our advisory group meetings, as well as our executive steering group here, are certainly a key piece of that, and making sure that all of our meetings are public and accessible and open to public input. I will note, let's see, I'm going to kind of skip to the bottom and just note, like, all of these other activities, again, I'll go into a little bit more detail, are underway, except for the 3 at the bottom. And so as we move into additional program work kind of later on this year, we will look at building upon some of our other efforts and kind of folding in and adding to some of the efforts that we already have underway. So that will include, we're exploring the options of, working groups, focus groups, discussion groups that can help us have really targeted conversations on specific topics, adding video storytelling campaigns, podcast series, and kind of other creative tools that we might be able to utilize to reach people in new ways. So next slide, please. So as already mentioned, yesterday we launched an online open house that we will have ongoing this month, and really trying to provide avenues for people to get background on the program and really understand where we are, what the process is, what our timeline is. And so really kind of providing that foundational piece so that the community can really give us substantive input and help inform the program. So on the online open house itself, you can directly submit comments and input through the web platform, but we are also really trying to drive people towards the interactive survey to provide more in-depth feedback as we work on the purpose, meaning, vision, and values. So the only other thing I would note, the online open house is available in 8 languages in addition to English. So we have it so that includes all of the materials as well as the web platform itself, in Russian and Ukrainian, Chinese, which includes simplified and traditional, Somali, Korean, Spanish, and Vietnamese. We also have a direct number, to a lifeline to one of our team members who can help any community members who need assistance in completing the survey and or in requesting any information, such as if they would like it mailed to them instead, or if they would just like assistance in walking through the information. So next slide, please. So I mentioned the interactive survey. So this is linked through the online open house. And this is really where we're asking community members to kind of dig into the details and give us some substantive input in terms of their view on what are the transportation problems, what are the priorities, what are the values, that we should be taking into consideration as we are updating the purpose and need and establishing the vision and values. And because of the platform, we were limited to 3 languages for the online platform. So it is available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, but then we also have printed copies available in those 8 languages that I already mentioned. Okay, next slide, please. And so pairing with the online open house and the interactive survey, we are hosting 4 live community briefings, that the first of which starts tomorrow. And you can see the dates and times are listed on the slide. So the first is tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. And one of those will be completely conducted in Spanish. And this is really to provide a different format for people to get the background on the program and the information. So it will include a panel of the team members providing brief presentations and addressing frequently asked questions. And we'll also have a few live audience feedback questions that we'll be asking for people who participate in the Zoom webinar platform. So next slide, please. And a key piece of the work that we're doing now is just trying to get the word out that we are soliciting this input, that we are trying to get people to provide us feedback. And so for folks who remember the outreach campaign that we did for the recruitment of members for the advisory groups, we tried to kind of learn some lessons from there. It was a very effective campaign, but we tried to build upon it. So we tried to listen to feedback that we received from stakeholders, from the Bi-State Legislative Committee and others, and see where we could improve upon the efforts that we did. So we have direct mail postcards that were sent out to about 50,000 residences around the program area, and that was an increase from the recruitment efforts based on feedback that we'd received. We also have advertisements running in print publications, and we have 7 publications that we're currently running in there. Next slide, please. And we are pairing that with digital advertising as well. So we also have digital advertisements running in 9 publications, and we are pairing that with social media advertising as well as frequent social media posts. So really trying to, again, reach people through different avenues and through a range of sources, depending on how people get their information. Okay, next slide, please.
Kimberly, we just have a few minutes left for this section. Thanks.
I knew that was going to happen. Thank you. So a new piece that we did not do in the last round, but that we'd heard some great feedback and recommendations on, was to incorporate radio advertising, excuse me. So we have chosen 2 local radio stations to advertise in that are really focused on multicultural communities. And we're trying to, we have direct links that we've publicized with them to try to help us track the effectiveness of the outreach for those as well. So next slide, please. And we are also making sure that we're doing some direct stakeholder outreach. And so this was already on the list, already planned, but we got some great feedback from our community advisory group specifically to also look at different avenues or different ways to better utilize our community-based organizations to help us get the word out. So we have reached out to over 300 organizations to directly share our engagement opportunities and ask them to help us spread the word within their networks. And we also have an ongoing invitation to those organizations or to any organization who would like a program briefing to come actually speak to their group and give a briefing and an update on the program. And we'll be doing some targeted outreach to follow up with many of those organizations as well. And to get the word out to our multicultural communities, we are continuing our work with our amazing multicultural outreach liaisons. And so they are, so we're working with 6 liaisons that are fluent in other languages and really directly and deeply connected within their local communities to help get that direct outreach to community members, excuse me. And as I mentioned, we have our survey printed in hard copies in those 8 languages. So our liaisons also have copies of those, and they're also available to help community members either fill them out or to mail copies or just to help get the word out directly as well. So next slide, please. There we go. Sorry, Deb, I did my best. If we have any additional time, certainly would love any additional feedback or can certainly respond to any additional questions.
You did a great job. It was a huge amount of information to share in a short amount of time. So really appreciate it, Kimberly. Anybody else clarifying questions, observations? Yes, go ahead, Kristen.
I just had a very quick question about the definition of workforce opportunities in the focus groups. Was that individuals and community members thinking of opportunities across the river for work, or was it opportunities for work on building, constructing, designing the bridge? How is that defined?
That is an excellent question. And Greg, unless you happen to know, we might have to get back to you on that one, Kristen. Yeah, I don't want to misspeak, and I'm not sure off the top of my head.
No worries, that would be great. Thank you.
I'm not sure either of the specifics of that question.
Okay. We can certainly follow up.
Yep, we'll follow up for you. Good. Anybody else? All right, huge lift, huge opportunities here, and we're looking forward to folks jumping onto the website and tuning in and joining in. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, Kimberly, much appreciated. So we are moving on to the next section. You can pretend I gave you a stretch break. Sorry, power through because it's a pretty quick meeting. So we're on to the topic of updating purpose and need and establishing community vision and value. And Chris Regan, I think you're going to kick us off for this section, correct?
That's right. Thanks, Deb. And hello, everyone. My name is Chris Regan. I'm the environmental manager for the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program. I'm going to tell you a little bit about where we've been, where we are, and then I'm going to hand it over to Administrator Johnson to talk a little bit about where we're going. So next slide, please, Josh. Many of you have seen this slide before. We've inherited quite a bit of information from prior planning efforts. We're taking that information right now and we're looking at what has changed. So we're diving into the details, we're seeking feedback, and you've heard a lot about that earlier. And then we're going to change that into the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program's purpose and need and vision and values. And that's the information that we're going to look through the lens to get to our suite of alternatives. Next slide, please. So our previously identified problems included safety, impaired freight movement, congestion, seismic vulnerability, inadequate bike and pedestrian paths, and limited public transportation. Next slide. We've been working a lot with a number of staff to try to get to a place to understand what has changed. And we've already heard quite a bit that for seismic issues, potential damage to the bridge in a seismic event and its role in emergency response is key and should be emphasized. That safety and incident vulnerabilities become worse and extends to all modes of transportation, including transit. That congestion continues to impact freight, transit reliability, and also spills into other roads. That we need to find the best way to reflect that the program will be delivered through a climate and equity lens, guided by regional and state policies and priorities. That growth and interest in active transportation connections as land surrounding the bridge grows and develops has to be addressed. Growing demand for modal choices, that the route is a regionally and nationally significant truck route and it's significant for marine and rail traffic. All of this is helping us to refine a purpose and need statement and dive deeper into the issues so that we can drive towards alternatives. I know that was quick, a lot of information quickly on top of the big information you already had, but now I'm going to hand it over to Administrator Johnson to talk a little bit about where we're going.
Okay, I
Next
think
slide,
we have another slide. So this is a slide that we use to demonstrate of our key milestones of where we're at with the advisory groups and community engagement. So you can see some of the past efforts, but you also see that there is a major milestone slated for March. And that major milestone is to bring to the bi-state legislative group a draft purpose and need, vision and values, so they can give input and it can be inserted back into that diagram you see in the bottom, back into that spinning wheel to have more input from executive steering group, equity, community advisory group, and the community at large. So we are once again going to take that input and revise and look at what we have. Then we're going to put something else back together on a consensus basis. And in May, we plan on moving that back to the bi-state ledge committee for their final approval. And if we are successful in that, that will start the process of putting together criteria for screening alternatives and putting alternatives together. So that is the game plan for the next couple months on a big picture basis. Next slide. So the questions that we're going to put to this group today are questions that we have been in one form or another asking the other groups to start thinking about and also to start giving us feedback on. So we wanted to get feedback from this group on what has changed. And we talked to your staff members and two of the key things that they told us that are game changers to this program is a focus on equity as well as a focus on climate. So we're going to ask you as a roundtable exercise to go around and give us your view on what has changed in our region since the previous planning efforts. Why are these changes important for our regional transportation system? And how can these changes inform the IBR program? So with that, Deb, I am going to flip it to you to moderate this session.
So thank you for that, Administrator Johnson. And it looked like, Commissioner Berkman, did you have a clarifying question before we jump in?
Yes, on the previous slide, what is the timing of the presentation to the Bi-State Legislative Committee? I think I heard you say final in May, but there's a draft going earlier. When does that occur?
That draft is at the end of March. We're still negotiating a date to meet with the Bi-State Legislative Group as they are in session, but we're shooting for the end of March to bring a product to them, a draft product for them to review.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Secretary Millar, your hand is up.
I just wanted to confirm with Greg that the milestones in March and May are aspirational We don't want to have a bad product just because we've put a star on the calendar. We think we can get there, but if we need more time, we'll be bringing that discussion back to this group. So I just want to make sure that people understand schedule is important because time is money, but we're not going to advance bad decisions just to stay on schedule. If we need the time, we'll take the time. But as we take the time, please understand that has other consequences. So,
Secretary Millar, you are absolutely correct. And I've had individual questions come to me about the timing of are we moving too fast? Are we being too ambitious? So our schedule is ambitious, but we are not handcuffed by our schedule. If we don't have the right input, if we need more time to circle around some of these questions, we will take that time. And we've expressed that to the bi-state ledge group.
And just one more thought. I know nobody on this call has ever done this, but don't use the calendar as, let's have the honest discussion and make honest decisions and not hold everybody else hostage to the calendar because you're not getting everything you want. There is some compromise that has to happen, but that's informed compromise. And I want to make sure that everybody fundamentally believes that they are being heard and their concerns are being cooked into the project going forward. So we're going to do our best as a team, the two transportation agencies, and encourage you to, hold us to a good product. But we also have to manage time and money. And so, let's hold us to a good product in as efficient a way as we can.
Thank you for those comments.
Yeah. Thank you for the words. So I get the fun task of trying to make sure I can make it once around the round table and still finish at 3 o'clock and still leave a little bit of time if there's public comment. So I am going to just kind of call out some names and work our way around. Maybe if you take a couple minutes each, and we'll see, make sure we leave time for everybody. So I'd like to just start, President Peterson, I don't mind it. Hope you don't mind if I put you in the spot, but Metro and then RTC, and then I'll keep going from there. I didn't give you a heads up.
I thought for sure I'd be last.
Sorry about that.
I guess I want to say thank you for starting this discussion. It is necessary to acknowledge what has changed. And thank you for acknowledging that we're heard on what has been changed, is that at least we know for our region, we have focused everything on 2 lenses of equity and climate change, racial equity to be very specific, not geographic equity. It is very much about racial equity. So I just want to make sure that we continue to move forward with those as the lenses, and they are part of the purpose and need and not as part of values and visions. I think enough of us have been through these processes long enough that if it is not included in the purpose and need, it will not actually make it to a priority. And I think in this case that there are so many different things that we know how to do better than we did last time, from workforce agreements through to how to mitigate GHG emissions and what that means for travel demand, and how do we do that differently. And let me just say, one of the big things that's different on both sides of the river is in terms of travel demand is that conversation around tolling as well as high capacity transit, and the value that both sides have on high capacity transit now and getting that across both sides. So I think these 2 things are extremely important to get into the purpose and need statement.
Okay. Thank you, President Peterson. If I could go to RTC next. Chair Hughes.
Yeah, one thing that I was thinking about has changed significantly is our data set for our users that we have on this bridge. They're so much better today than they were in 2005. We've had some presentation from WashDOT at RTC about the information they gather using cell phones and whatnot. We know where the traffic is going when they're on I-5. And I think, I think before there was a lot of surveys. I'm not going to say necessarily guessing, that may not be fair, but today we have a much deeper understanding what people actually do and where they go. And I think that makes a difference. And the only other thing I want to bring up too is on the congestion part of it. Yeah, we know it's bad. We know it's been worse. I know in Clark County since 2005, I think we've grown by 27%. But we can't forget that this bridge would probably be here for another 100 years if it does get replaced, if that's the option we take. What's the population growth going to be in 20, 30, 40 years from now? It's going to be significantly higher. And so I think that the growth rate should be able to continue at a much greater capacity than we're going to have today.
Thank you. I'd like to go to the cities next, Portland and then Vancouver.
Thank you. I'll say the biggest changes since 2005 is that we are in the midst of a racial justice reckoning that has, for the city of Portland, made us prioritize the impacts of any policy decisions on Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. The second is that we're absolutely committed to climate mitigation and looking at green technology that we are prepared to put in place for the future. We also have a commitment to getting people out of their automobiles as much as possible. And so I guess I will say three things. So it's the racial justice reckoning that's really about centering Black, Indigenous, and other communities of color. It is the climate mitigation strategy and plan that we have. And the third is to ensure that we're putting green technology in place so that we don't continue to be over-reliant on fossil fuel to fund our operations at the city.
Thank you so much. And Mayor McInerney-Ogle?
You bet. Thank you so very much. I wanted to point out that since we lost the project 8 years ago, 26,000 people have moved into Vancouver, which is the population of about West Lynn. And 68,000 people have moved into Clark County, which is not only West Lynn, but the population of Lake Oswego. So think of how this community has changed in just 8 years. That means that we've had increased congestion on the I-5 bridge during the AM/PM peak travel times, and that lasts several hours for both of those periods. The bridge, we know, is a major bottleneck and significantly contributes to the congestion of the corridor. And while we've known that the bridge is seismically vulnerable, I think there's a greater public awareness, if you would, about those risks, because the I-5 bridge is the key regional connection to our emergency response. And think about the specialized medical facilities that we have on both sides, and that bridge is a critical lifeline for those recovery efforts. You'll hear from the Port of Vancouver about the employment and activity that has grown significantly with the jobs that people need to get to and the increased flow of freight that moves up and down the West Coast. The city of Vancouver, you know, is growing rapidly with all of the thousands of new residential units and new office spaces and commercial spaces, and the investments we're making in roads and the public access to the bridge impact area. But also know that the existing infrastructure that we have for transit has changed. Vancouver has the new BRT system, and we implemented buses on shoulder, so we have a more efficient movement of transit on the I-5. But along with that, we have residents that have a demand for reliable transit. And at the same time that they want reliable transit, we have travel time delays that are increasing due to the congestion, which was that first item on I-5. And so people need reliable transit options to access to all the jobs and services. And then, of course, the region's affordable housing crisis has grown more acute since the last effort of the bridge, the old CRC. And so we need transportation options that are reliable and affordable to connect people for their jobs. But the public is also aware, as been mentioned before, the need to address the climate change and then the approved outcomes of historically disadvantaged communities And we know that we can do better.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Next up, if I could, is CTRAN and then TriMet. Sean, I kind of put you on the spot.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would just agree with what the mayor said. You know, a lot has changed on several fronts, and we want to ensure that we maintain equity, especially near the bridge area. Whereas the mayor pointed out, we've seen quite a bit of new citizens in Clark County, and I assume the same over on the Portland side. Quite a bit has changed on the public transportation front in 10 years. You know, we utilize bus on shoulder and BRT as very functional and cost-efficient ways of doing business. And as well, we need to continue to think about the freight corridors, both marine and on the road. Both of our ports are doing quite a bit more business than they used to. We need to make sure that the I-5 corridor is, one, able to move that freight effectively and efficiently, and two, doing so in a way that does not harm members of the community. So there's a lot that's changed in that period of time, and I think that we have the right people to be able to do that. And I definitely echo many of the mayor's comments and those before me as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And then to TriMet.
Really tough acts to follow, and I would agree with everything that's been said. If I were to identify something that hasn't been said, I'd say it's affordability. And what I mean by that is the affordability of housing, the affordability of transportation, the affordability to access employment, and the time value of money. And all of those things have gotten more scarce over time. And so seeking transportation solutions that can help our community, and especially folks that are having to travel big distances because of economic conditions, how can we make transportation more frictionless for that customer? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now if I could to the ports, Port of Portland, and then Vancouver.
Well, this is going to be a lot of echoing comments that have been made, but to the mayor's comments about congestion, impacts of transit, freight, vehicle travel, that has just all grown exponentially since we were last having these conversations. We believe a stronger emphasis certainly on equity, on climate issues, resiliency as a kind of a broader, with a broader definition. And then the only thing that I would add that is a very Port of Portland specific change, and we've spent time talking with Greg about this and Deb, but the Port of Portland no longer plans for a marine terminal at West Hayden Island. And that was a big piece of the conversation 8 years ago, and we just wanted to be able to share with our partners here and others that we do not plan for a marine terminal, and that may give us some more options as to what this looks like going forward. So thank you.
Thank you for your words, appreciate it. And Port of Vancouver.
Thank you. Obviously, a lot of great comments been made here. I could talk about climate or equity, but I want to focus for a minute on freight. When I look at the CRC project purpose, the freight statement in there was improve highway freight mobility and address interstate travel and commerce needs in the bridge influence area. While that's good, there's a lot more content in the vision and value. And so I believe we need to go back and raise the visibility, raise the focus on freight. And the reason why I mention that is that we have a greater need than I believe was foreseen at the time. We just heard, you know, freight mobility improvements, they help create jobs and workforce opportunities, and that's what people are asking for. That's reaching into our equity. Clark County has also changed. We're becoming more diverse. Slower than what I'd like to see, but we are becoming more diverse. We're changing, definitely different than 2005. And to give you a few numbers, in the last 15 years, the Port of Vancouver has grown from employing about 1,600 people in direct jobs to almost 4,000. So you're looking at a 150% increase in that time. And our economic increase of what we contribute to the area is now over $2 billion a year more now than what we had then. and this includes a Great Recession. We weren't looking at those kinds of growth numbers when we did this project before. We've added over 1 million square feet of new commercial and industrial lease space in the last 7 years, put $250 million in a rail improvement that's going to bring in a bunch of businesses. We have active investments underway at Terminal 1, another 500 acres of the Gateway project. Now, overall, we're putting hundreds of millions of dollars in the ground, and that's just us. If you look up the I-5 up to the confluence of I-5 and 205, that's the start of the Discovery Corridor. And there we're talking about, what is that number? It's huge, around 5,000 acres that will be coming online in the next decade or two. So put all this together and then ask ourselves, do we have the right emphasis and statements wrapped around freight? Because that is going to be the lifeblood of not only our communities, but also the West Coast, because that is our major freight backbone.
Thank you. Thank you for your words. I'd like to turn next to our co-chairs. And Lynn, I see you. I think Ed might have dropped off. So maybe just, there you go. Yep.
Thank you. Others provided qualitative explanations that are superior. So I'm just going to list the things that I think have changed that we need to pay particular attention to in addition to those other people said. I believe first and foremost, there's an equity imperative. I also believe that there's an increasing income disparity, and that wraps around many of the other issues that other committee members addressed. There is definitely increased congestion and travel time uncertainty, and that impacts all of the bridge users, as well as increasing impact and recognition of greenhouse gas emissions, and that we cannot afford to do to wait any further. And then finally, Kristen, I'm glad you mentioned it, but I had read in the previous documents about the terminal addition and that would no longer be needed. And so to me, that's a little more of a technical aspect, but still an important aspect. So I would echo that as well.
I just want to make one more look in case Ed came back, but I don't see him. So Lynn, oh, hi. Oh, I thought I heard somebody else saying something, but President Peterson, looks like you might have a question or feedback.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to put this at this point, but I do think we need to get on the table how we reflect in our purpose and need the fact that the Portland region has a policy of only 3 through lanes in each direction. And we are still working on the rest of our system to make sure that there are 3 through lanes in each direction. This portion already has 3 through lanes in each direction. And so in terms of the future, and maybe this is getting into the values, but somehow I believe our purpose and need needs to reflect more about moving people and goods and services and less about the vehicles, because of the fact that we need to figure out how to balance the difference between the vehicles and the people as we move into the future. The bridge will be there for a very long time. I think that was a very good point. But the amount of hard infrastructure versus the amount of services that we provide on that infrastructure are 2 separate questions.
I want another 2 hours with all of you. I'm having trouble moving. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, Deb, did you
yes,
ask? Did you
I
ask
was.
both DOTs there?
I was heading to the DOTs, and then I was actually coming up to you for the roundup. So thank you. Yes. And who wants to go first? Director Strickler, Secretary Millar. I can pick one of you. How about Director Strickler? He's not on screen though, so Secretary Millar may call on you first in case he's struggling with his audio.
Go ahead, Roger. I just figured it out, but go ahead, please.
No, after you.
So, yes, believe it or not, I did just figure out the mute. I would say this. In 1917, the original bridge was built, and it was built to replace what they believed at the time was a dying service, and a service that needed to provide other outcomes and other benefits to the region. And I think what we've seen since then is the bridge serves a function that we never expected it to serve, and it has served that function for quite some time. As I translate that into the future, the things that I know that haven't changed as I look to what the system is supporting right now are the need for balancing the economy, the need for recognizing access and moving people to President Peterson's comment, moving people is such a priority. And we need to figure out the best way to do that as part of this bridge. And so those things really have not changed as far as from the last process, with the one exception that the demand and the need for that has actually increased across all modes. And I think that's one of the things that we have to consider. As I think about the things that we need to focus on for the next steps, I think we certainly have to look at what are the land uses in the area. What's the intersection between those land uses and how those are influencing people's travel patterns and behaviors? I think the economy is certainly another one. Individual incomes is another. I mean, we could go on for quite some time. So I guess I would summarize all of that by saying we know that the demand on these two structures has grown, and we know that we have to do something. So I hear agreement that we need to replace the bridge. But what that looks like going forward, I think we still have some work to do, and that's the part that we have in front of us. The last thing that I would say is this. I can tell you firsthand, because I was part of the last process, one of the things that is significantly different now, and I'm really happy about it, is the attention and the intentionality around diversity and equity and how we talk about access to maybe those that we have forgotten in the past. And I can tell you this, we have a sensibility and a conversation around those things now in ways that we never did before, or if we did, we just didn't talk about it. And so as we think about going forward, that's certainly an element that is first and foremost in my mind to make sure that we are providing access and providing opportunity to those that frankly we did not just in the last process, but in transportation in general. So, Mr. Millar.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, a lot of stuff has changed. Commissioner Hardesty might not know it, but I was hired out of college to work for the Portland Office of Transportation. So I've looked at this project from both sides of the river. And what I think we've learned in recent years is our increasing interdependence as communities. It's not Portland or Vancouver. It's not Oregon or Washington. It's Portland and Vancouver. It's Oregon and Washington. The four-county area and the counties around those four counties are a substantial region in the United States. And we need to recognize that it functions that way. While it consists of the neighborhoods and the political subdivisions of that region. There's an economy that is regional. There's an access to opportunity that's regional. There's an access to quality of life that's regional. And it is a part increasingly being seen as a part of a mega region, that the economy of the Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area, Seattle, Tacoma metropolitan area, and the Vancouver, British Columbia, I mean, we have these relationships, and I know the ports, while we compete, we collaborate. The cities, we compete and we collaborate. And I think that has become increasingly important and increasingly something we're aware of. The second thing I think we're increasingly aware of, to build off what Lynn Peterson said, transportation is not an end unto itself. I get real crazy when somebody says mobility is important. Mobility is not important. Access is important. And it's trade that's important to us, regardless of how those goods and services move. We are a trade-centric part of the world. and trade is important to all of our communities. Access to quality of life. We're competing on a planet where you can live anywhere and be successful. And if you can, why this community? What differentiates it? So that access to quality of life, to neighborhoods that work for everybody, to transportation systems that get you where you want to go. And the third piece, in terms of this being a means to an end, is access to opportunity. And I don't think we were thinking about our transportation system that way before, but it's access to opportunity for everyone in the community. And we need to focus on that. Another thing I think we learned from painful experience is it is important to be complete and meet all the forms and all the rest of that of the federal process. Because a share of the money, we hope, is going to come from the federal government. But it's an increasingly smaller share of the money. And what is just as important as the federal process is our two state processes and our local processes. And all of that has to work. And we cannot let a federal requirement stand in the way of regional or local success. If we get to one of those places, we're going to have to not just say yes, but take it up to, we've got a new Secretary of Transportation, might have a different worldview. Let's take advantage of that. Because at the end of the day, we want a project that meets the community's objectives as a means to the community realizing its dreams.
Thank you. Thank you for the words. And if I could, Administrator Johnson, reflections, wrap-ups?
So Deb, instead of me going on, why don't we go into the public input, and if there's time left, I'll do a wrap-up after.
All right, I appreciate that. We'll save a little space for you at the end. Well, I want to honor the complexity and the depth of the remarks that we just heard and say that this is to be continued, and there are lots of good note takers here because we're going to be using your input very much so in the months as we move forward. So thank you to everyone on this piece. As Greg just said, we're now going to head into the public input section. And if I could ask, and I'm going to have my team help me a little bit here, that if you're interested in providing brief public input, to please raise your hand. And again, you should be in the Zoom meeting to accomplish this. And that'll indicate to us that you're interested in providing input. I'm going to remind people we're asking that it be brief. We're asking that it try to be relevant to the topics we've been covering today. And then I'll be able to divide the time. Folks can have up to 2 minutes, and it'll be a total of 10. I'm sorry, I have a little bit of a dry cough. Does it look like, Gilly, we have one person wants to provide public input?
Yep, there's Bob Ortblad.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead and help Bob go off mute so he can speak. And then Bob, if you don't mind, just name and affiliation before you speak. Can you hear us, Bob?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Awesome, we can hear you, great.
My name's Bob Ortblad. I'm with the Washington Business Alliance. I've got a master's in civil engineering and an MBA. I sent an email into, I hope everybody's seen it. I'll just read it very briefly to reinforce it. I'm saying the Columbia River crossing bridge design was from 10 years ago. It was basically a 1950s, 60s design. It would have made Robert Moses proud. It would have covered Hayden Island, Vancouver, and concrete. I suggested if you look at an immersed tube tunnel, which have a much lower impact on both the Hayden Island, Vancouver, and the Columbia River. Gothenburg, Sweden, which is the largest port in Scandinavia and the world's most sustainable city, just opened their second immersed tube tunnel. Their first one was built in 1968. The new one, the Maryholm Tunnel, can carry between the two tunnels under the river can carry up to 180,000 vehicles with little impact on the riverbanks. I've sent some graphics. I hope you can take a look at them. Thank you very much.
Bob, thank you so much for being here, for your public input. Appreciate it. And Gilly, do you see anybody else with a hand raised?
There's no more public comment.
Okay. Really appreciate it to our audience that's listening. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, if you'd still like to provide input, please go to the website or call the 1-800 number. We're glad to receive it, and we'll make sure it all gets transmitted to the ESG members. Very much appreciated. So we are moving on to the wrap up, and I'm going to do my piece pretty quickly, and then I'll hand it back to Greg for closing remarks. Your next meeting is March 17th, so you know it's every third Wednesday from 1 to 3 p.m. At that meeting, we'll have, again, updates and input from the CAG and EAG. We'll have report out on all of the public engagement that you heard about, the interactive survey, community engagement activities, and we'll be reviewing the progress on purpose and need and community vision and values with, if you remember, it's that first yellow star, because after your March meeting, then Administrator Johnson will be taking the update to the Bi-State Legislative Committee at the end of March. So it will be a very busy month from here through to mid and end of March. We do encourage you over the course of the next month, please don't hesitate, reach out to each other, reach out to us if there's more conversation to be had. There'll be lots of activity with your staff and with many, many of the both advisory groups and the publics. I do want to just confirm a couple sets of action items that we've collected. One is we always post these slides to the website right after the meeting. Any other materials that have been shared will also be posted to the website. We always do a high-level meeting summary, so we'll make sure to have that drafted, reviewed, and ultimately you will see it, and then those are always posted to the website. Please remember, to everybody listening, over the next month, we have so much available between open houses, the online survey, and live events. Don't hesitate, let us know if you need help finding those, but please visit the website to find lots and lots of details. And then I know a number of you had either questions or ideas or suggestions, and we'll take all those back with us. Make sure to incorporate your ideas and suggestions and get back to you on questions and action items. That is all that I have. So back to you, Administrator Johnson, for the wrap up. Oh wait, Commissioner Hardesty, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask the question. So I have two quick questions. One, is this meeting time something that can be changed? It will continue to conflict with afternoon council meetings on the days that we have Wednesday afternoon council meetings. So that's one question. And two, well, actually, based on that question, if we can't change the date, can we change the time?
I'm pausing. Oh, Greg, go ahead.
So I can jump in on a portion of that. This was a tremendously complex negotiation to get to Wednesdays at this time, and we can send out more polls to the folks who are a part of this, and make sure that that this time is still relevant. But we threaded a very narrow needle to get here. But we're willing to help address conflicts that you have and others may have by going back out to the group to see if we can find some time that can meet everyone's needs going into the future.
I appreciate what a nightmare I've just asked you about. I do appreciate that. I want you to know it doesn't go unnoticed, but if at all possible, and clearly this is a priority, so it's important for me to be here, but it's also important for me to be at council meetings when they happen. So.
Understood. We will make the ask of this group. So you'll probably be seeing some kind of doodle poll that looks at time and days going into the future.
And then President Peterson's hands up. Go ahead.
I just wanted to note a topic for future discussion, and I think it can run in parallel, but basically coming out of our purpose and need and vision and values, I would like to start digging into the long-term workforce agreement type policy level discussions, and what we're trying to get out of this project in terms for local jobs, local money circulating in our economy, and the different ways that we have to be able to get that for procurement on both sides of the river, as well as some maybe more innovative approaches, so that when we actually go to do bids, we're ready for that conversation. Look how optimistic I am. But I think it's important that we work in parallel, not at the last minute, because these are very complex, tough issues. And so I think folks who are looking to work on this project should know what values we actually hold up front.
I'm sorry, I did remember the last thing, which is somebody said that, I think it was Deb said that the presentation would be on our website. Could you send it to the executive committee so that we have it without having to go to a website looking for it?
Yes, we can. Yep, we'll send it directly to you too. Yep, thank you. So thank you. Yes, go ahead. Thank you for that, President Peterson. Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, and then Administrator Johnson, to you for wrap up.
So we are 1 minute over our time, and we like to be timely. So I'm going to have just some very minimal remarks to say thank you so much for your input. And as Deb said, we took extensive notes on what was being said. I would, one of the things that I want to express to this group, and we've expressed it to both CAG and EAG, is that there is no perfect project, no perfect program. Perfect projects are sitting in someone's drawer somewhere because they never could get built. So we're hoping that we can get folks to consensus to make sure that we are addressing the primary issues that are on the table and try and get everything into this. But there is no perfect program or no perfect project that's going to solve everybody's wants and desires. So we're striving for it. And we hopefully, with your help and input and the community advisory group and equity advisory group, we will get to something that's acceptable for both communities. So with that, just want to thank you for your time, and we'll enjoy seeing you next month. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for your hard work and dedication. Please stay safe and healthy.
Thanks,
all right. And meeting adjourned. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.